Pastor, God bless you, brother, as you bring forth your word. God bless
Thank you. I was reminded that Baptists don't practice daylight saving time because once saved, always saved. But something Baptists do is take an offering. So we'll ask our men to come and take our offering. The Song of Solomon, chapter 5. We have read through the whole book and tried to take note of what we thought might be the story arc. And then we looked at the opening chapters, which had the courtship, and then the middle section, which was all about the celebration, the wedding ceremony. And these remaining chapters, chapter 5, verse 2 to the end of the book, is all about married life. Now, I believe my daughter has tried to train her children not to use the words, I hate this, I hate this. So they have found an appropriate and somewhat clever way to express the same feeling. They say, I don't love this. And last weekend they were attending the wedding of Brad's brother. And when Blake got back and came to Tuesday night's missionary conference meeting, he saw his Cubby's teacher, and he went over and said hi to her, very cute and sweet, and just pronounced, I don't love weddings. Well, I suppose getting dressed up in a suit for 10 hours is probably not the idea of a small boy, the small boy's idea of fun. I don't love weddings. I suspect he'll change his mind enough to endure one here and there in the days ahead. I say all that to say, I have not grown to love Song of Solomon. I've told you many times I'm not really much of a poet aficionado, poetry aficionado. So it's a song, it's a poem, it's a struggle. And I'm glad this will be the last message in Song of Solomon. And I'm looking forward to moving on to something more in my comfort zone. Marriage. The first two might have made us somewhat uncomfortable with all of the flowery expressions of what is just an enamored view of one another in a courtship and the wedding. Married life, we will find from these chapters in the Bible, takes work. Well, I thought I'd get a couple resounding amens to that. Let me say it again. Marriage takes work. Well, it does not just automatically fall into place. There are things that both individuals, husband and wife, need to bring to that marriage and continue to bring to that marriage in order for it to thrive. And I think we'll see some of that. Again, it's flowery language, it's a song, therefore it's poetry, and I probably don't get it as well as I should, and I'm relieved that this will be it. But through it, I see this. Marriage is good, but it takes work. For it to be good, it certainly takes work. And let me introduce that by saying I've heard this in two different phrasings, though I think they mean exactly the same thing. And here's one of them. A man gets married fervently hoping his wife never changes. A woman gets married fully expecting him and counting on him to change. I think that was said in a comedic format at first, and everyone chuckled and laughed. You're looking at me like, wow, that's profound. The other way is a woman hopes marriage will change their husband. Men hope marriage won't change their wives, and both end up disappointed. So my question to you as we interact just for a few minutes here, why are those things a saying? Why does a man hope the woman he is about to marry never changes? And why does the woman look at her man or her husband and say, I think I can fix him? I mean, I hope he changes. Why are those things somewhat real? You can say, I've heard it said, or some people may believe, if you're not sure about the person sitting next to you. But I would like some response to that. Why do you think those things are true? Okay. All right. Stay beautiful. Okay. That's probably part of it. Other thoughts? Yeah. Yes. Yes. I think another solid hit on the nail right there. Okay. What else? I missed that. Okay. Mm. 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 Okay. A little bit of the fantasy before marriage, what things will look like in the future. Yes. That's a high standard. Wayne. Well, yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Have to think about that one a little bit, but okay. My thought was that it's pretty simple. When they're dating, they put on their best foot, best front, face, whatever. And she tends to be, oh, whatever you want to do is fine with me. Where do you want to go out to eat? I don't care. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. You want to come over and watch me fix my car? Oh, yes. I can't think of anything more exciting to do than come over and watch you fix your car. And he looks at her and sees this starry-eyed, love, respect, you're so smart. She looks at him and says, he's got some growing to do, but doesn't really let on. And then, of course, marriage comes, and the day-to-day, the routine. Children speed up this process vastly. You've got to grow up, and not everything you want to do is just the greatest idea in the world. So that's what I think is part of what's going on. Now, having said all that, let's see what God tells us in these final chapters of the Song of Solomon about his married life. Father, I pray that we would be able to see this and see in the Hebrew poetry and the song that we're reading some nuggets of truth that will help us understand relationships and values, and endeavor and purpose in our own lives and hearts to be the kind of people that are dependable and faithful to you and to those whom we love. I pray in Jesus' name, amen. In ancient times, especially in Jewish weddings in ancient times, during that generally week-long time of celebration, the family and friends really treat the newlyweds like royalty. Everything about them is just, whatever they want, and nothing is too good, and then reality sets in. Modern times, you've got the honeymoon, and we use that expression to apply to other areas of life. And the honeymoon is, of course, that ideal time where you're away from your responsibilities, you devote all your time to each other, and it too comes to an end. You return to normal life. Normal life has challenges and issues and responsibilities and duties. And Solomon and his new wife, the Shulamite, return to life, married life. And starting in verse 2 of chapter 5, going through verse 9, we read what could be another dream. She had one in an earlier chapter, but it could also be rooted in some truth, or it could be an actual relating a true story. It begins in verse 2, I sleep, but my heart is awake. Now that could mean she's sleeping and she's dreaming. It could mean she got herself in bed and ready for sleep and was drowsy and kind of dozing off, but not totally asleep, because she then says, it is the voice of my beloved. He knocks, saying, open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is covered with dew, my locks with the drops of the night. She responds, I have taken off my robe, how can I put it on again? I have washed my feet, how can I defile them? In other words, I'm in bed and I really don't want to get out of bed. I have my cozy pajamas on and I'm warm. How dare you ask me to get up and open the door? Verse 4, she says, my beloved put his hand by the latch of the door, and my heart yearned for him. So something happened between I'm not sure I want to leave the comfort of my bed and get up and open the door, to hearing and seeing his desire to come into her, and she has a change of heart. My heart yearned for him. I arose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the lock. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and was gone. Now, I don't know how long she laid there in her comfortable flannel pajamas wrestling with that before she got up to open the door, and how much time he gave her, if it was a couple quick, "Are you there? Are you awake?" And then he said, "Nah, I'm just going to go play video games." I don't really know how much time elapsed, but she changed her mind. She opened the door. He was gone. She said, "My heart leaped up when he spoke. I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer." Now, apparently, she had woken up fully enough to get herself clothed and went outside, out of the door. She says in verse 7, "The watchman who went about the city found me." Now, this is very similar to the earlier dream, but in the earlier dream, the watchman helped her try to find her beloved before they were married. This time it says, "They struck me, they wounded me." It's like they thought maybe, or they didn't know her for sure, and they thought maybe she was an immoral woman out trying to ply her trade. "The keepers of the walls took my veil away from me," which would be a pretty audacious thing to do to an actual queen or the wife of a king. Then she said, "I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him I am lovesick." The daughters of Jerusalem reply in verse 9, "What is your beloved more than any other beloved, or more than another beloved, O fairest among women? What is your beloved more than another beloved, that you so charge us? Why are you asking for our help? Why is he any more important than our beloved?" And that "O fairest among women" could be an honest compliment. She was considered very beautiful even by these daughters of Jerusalem. Or it could be a little passive-aggressive, "Oh, you think you're so beautiful, you can't even keep a hold of your husband, huh?" So what does the Shulamite do? She lapses into her familiar pattern and extols her husband's handsome and rugged and powerful appearance. "My beloved is white," and I've never known how to pronounce that word. Is it ruddy or Rudy? Well, that he is. According to her, handsome or white and ruddy, which probably means in his youth, comparative youth, he is radiant with health and strength. "Chief among 10,000, she said. "His head is like the finest gold." And we're quickly going to dispense with the idea she's saying he's blonde, because his hair actually is black as a raven later in the verse. But to say his head is like the finest gold is probably a reference to what she thought of his mind. And she thought his mind was valuable. He's a man who can think. So not only is he just radiant with health and vitality, his brains are worth something. His hair, of course, she would comment on that, wavy, black. Some of us never had that. His eyes are like doves by the rivers of water, washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are like a bed of spices, banks of scented herbs. His lips are lilies, dripping liquid myrrh. If he heard that, he might have said, "Ew, yuck." But to her, it was the highest of compliments. His hands are rods of gold set with beryl. His body is carved ivory inlaid with sapphires. His legs are pillars of marble set on bases of fine gold. She's describing a statue. And a statue is, of course, a depiction of the ideal man. The statues that you see from ancient Greek, they're just well done. The artistic expression is unbelievable, but but they're the ideal man, sculpted in the very literal meaning of that word, but into an ideal. And she said, that's him. He could be a sculpture. His countenance is like Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. That one just totally escapes me, but good on him, good on her. If his face looks like a bunch of trees and that's good, okay. His mouth is most sweet. Yes, he is altogether lovely. That phrase right there describes her heart for him. And she's trying to convey it, but in words that are ancient and now translated into English, and I'm sure it loses an awful lot, but he is altogether lovely, loses nothing. She loves him. She admires his appearance. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. So, of course, that missed opportunity when she doesn't get out of bed quickly enough leads to her trying to find him, which leads to an appeal to the women of Jerusalem to help her find him, which leads to her extolling his virtues, everything good about him. In chapter 6, verse 1, apparently night is probably past, daylight is coming. The daughters of Jerusalem ask her, where has your beloved gone, O fairest among women? Where has your beloved turned aside that we may seek him with you? She, because she isn't clueless, even though they haven't been married for long, she knew where he would be. She anticipated, and that just grows probably a little more common the longer you're married. Often my wife knows what I'm thinking when I can hardly put it into words myself, and often she knows where I've gone. Oh, he's probably over at the church. And vice versa. We have a sense of each other, and you probably know that in your own personal experience. So she knows. She says in verse 2, my beloved has gone to his garden, to the beds of spices, to feed his flock in the gardens, and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feeds his flock among the lilies. Solomon apparently was one who liked to be outside, who liked to be involved, hands-on, somewhat with the king's property. In this case, it would be his flocks. There probably was something a little soothing and calming about being there with the animals. They have simple needs. You can meet them and they're happy. That's not the way of ruling a kingdom at all. So it probably was a place that he often went and found some solace, or perhaps was rejuvenated there. And then in verse 3, kind of like the he is altogether lovely phrase of the previous chapter, she says, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. That's the expression that conveys, I am getting to know him, and he is getting to know me. Our relationship is maturing, it's growing, it's becoming what it ought to be. And that's a great way to express it. So she goes to the garden. She doesn't really need the help of the daughters of Jerusalem. She can find him on her own. And he sees her coming. And so what does he do? Does he chastise her for keeping him locked out the night before and not jumping up and opening the door when he knocks? Does he say, I heard you were out roaming around and the guards roughed you up a little bit. You shouldn't be out doing that. You could be mistaken for something that you aren't. I mean, did he rebuke her? No, not in this song. He breaks out into an equally extravagant praise of her. Oh, my love, you are as beautiful as Tirzah. Now that's a town, not a person. He's not comparing her to somebody else. That reminds me of one of those Pickles comics. And is it Pickles? The husband and wife are sitting out on the porch in one of those chairs, and he looks over at her and he says, "In the moonlight, your teeth are as beautiful as pearls." And she whips her head around and looks at him and says, "Who is Pearl, and what are you doing with her in the moonlight?" Tirzah is a city, and it actually happened to be the capital of northern Israel for a time. And he's basically saying, you are as beautiful as a capital city. And there is strength to that because he adds, lovely as Jerusalem. Then to our bemusement, or at least our bewilderment, he says, awesome as an army with banners. Yeah, I don't think I'd try that with my wife as a compliment, but it worked for him. Turn your eyes away from me, for they have overcome me, he says. Your hair is like a flock of goats going down from Gilead. And we've heard this before. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep, which have come up from the washing. Everyone bears twins, and none is barren among them. She has a full set of teeth, none are missing, and they're all white. Which, by the way, as I said a few weeks ago, is not especially common in ancient time with the dental care and hygiene that they did not have, that we have today. And then I didn't understand it the last time he said it, but he says in verse 7, like a piece of pomegranate are your temples behind your veil. And again, this is an effusive compliment. He is pouring out his praise for her. It loses something because we weren't there and we didn't live in the kind of setting and culture that they did, but that's what he's doing, and it comes across pretty plainly, even if we don't get it exactly. We know he's pouring out his praise. Verse 8, I'm not sure I would have tossed this in there if I were talking to her and trying to woo her, or at least, get on her good side. There are 60 queens and 80 concubines and virgins without number. Now from that, we surmise that this was somewhat early in Solomon's reign, because by the end of his reign, according to 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 3, he had how many wives? 700. And how many concubines? 300, a total of 1,000 women. Here, he was just getting started. 60 queens and 80 concubines. That's interesting to us, and we tisk and shake our heads and say, Solomon, remember, that was your downfall, which is what 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 4 says. They were the ones who dragged him down, all those wives. But what we see is he is saying, I already have this harem, but my dove, my perfect one, is the only one. In other words, when he thought about the wives he had and the concubines, she was the one that he favored. She was number one. The only one of her mother, the favorite of the one who bore her. The daughters saw her and called her blessed, the queens and the concubines, and they praised her. Now that's an interesting turn. If you've ever heard, read, or thought about the polygamy arrangements that have been in some countries and even some in our own country, it seems like most of that involves some controversy and some jealousy and not necessarily a harmonious living arrangement. But all of these, and there may have been that, but all of them agreed and praised her, that she was a particularly lovely woman. And I could mean that, and not just physically, but lovely in her personality too. They praised her. Who is she who looks forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, awesome as an army with banners? Again, with the army and banners, he comes back to that as a particularly, You are just the greatest thing since sliced bread. So the woman responds, verse 11, I went down to the garden of nuts to see the verdure of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded and the pomegranates had bloomed. Before I was even aware, my soul had made me as the chariots of my noble people. A commentator says she started out on a trip and she found herself surrounded by army and chariots. I don't know that I get that out of those verses, but I don't get much else either, so that's what she said. Solomon, return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look upon you. She, what would you see in the Shulamite? As it were, the dance of the two camps. Now that's a fascinating thing. The dance of the two camps, the last phrase of verse 13. If you have other translations, I'd love to hear what your translation has. Company of two armies. Anything else? A festive dance? A dance before two armies. I'm told that the Hebrew word is Mahanaim, a word that was used in Genesis chapter 32 when Jacob was traveling back and about to meet his brother Esau. He was fearful. Why would he be fearful? He took the birthright and ran away and left his brother with nothing, and now he's coming back. He wants to meet. I guess he wants to reconcile, but there's this fear of how he's going to be received. And right before they met, God gave him a vision of an army of angels sent from heaven to protect him. Wouldn't that be a calming thing? I'd love to see that on Thursday when I have a visit with the dentist, if I could see that army of angels that would just kind of protect me from that wicked dentist with the pick and everything else they have. That's what Jacob saw. So Jacob called the name of the place Mahanaim. He said because he saw two armies. He saw the army of God above, and he saw what he perceived to be an army of his own retainers and employees and servants and family. So it's about two armies. And often military language works its way into marriage. Some of it may not be the best sort of use. Like, my wife's a battle axe is not a suggested military usage for marriages, or my husband's on a campaign to destroy us and spend all our money, something like that. Not good. But in this case, these two armies, whether it's a literal dance or just their movement suggests that, is to give us the idea that there are two, she being one army, he being the other army, are marching together. And a common purpose is perhaps suggested, but more so, the protection that they can give to each other. The armies are not to fight each other, but they are there to support each other. And if one army is harassed on the flanks, the other army is there to step in and give support. And so together, they make a formidable force. And that's really what a marriage ought to be. If you choose to attack me, I am convinced it would bring great disappointment to my wife. She probably would be restrained and not physically maul you, but she may want to. And I'll say right out front and publicly the same if you were to attack her. I would come to her defense. I would have to restrain myself. That's the way marriage ought to be. We were curious when we saw that dynamic at work with our children. At home, they just fought like cats and dogs with each other. I mean, I'm probably exaggerating, and I don't want you to get the wrong idea, but they fought all the time. That's probably what turned my hair white to begin with, that constant, unending fighting. But when they went to school, if another kid turned on one of their siblings, wow, who would have thought that they would come to their defense? That's part of what marriage is all about. You don't mess with the one I love. So that's what we find at the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7, Solomon, how beautiful are your feet in sandals, O prince's daughter. The curves of your thighs are like jewels, the work of the hands of a skillful workman. Your navel is a rounded goblet. It lacks no blended beverage. Your waist is a heap of wheat set about with lilies. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes like the pools in Heshbon by the gate of Bath Rabbim. Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon. Again, men, don't use this with your wife. It was a compliment then, and it spoke of a regalness or a impressiveness, but it doesn't translate well to today. Which looks towards Damascus. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel, and the hair of your head is like purple. That doesn't mean she dyed her hair. It means the purple of the drapes and curtains in the palace. It was just beautiful. A king is held captive by your tresses. How fair and how pleasant you are, O love, with your delights. This stature of yours is like a palm tree, and your breasts like its clusters. I said, I will go up to the palm tree. I will take hold of its branches. Let now your breasts be like clusters of the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples, and the roof of your mouth like the best wine. Oh, that's Solomon. He had such a way with words. She responds, the wine goes down smoothly for my beloved, moving gently the lips of sleepers. I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. Come, my beloved, let us go forth to the field. Let us lodge in the villages. Let us go up early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine has budded, whether the grape blossoms are open and the pomegranates are in bloom. What is moving here through this, and this is not taking place all in the matter of days, this is something Solomon has written, and it covers a span of time, and I think at some point she suggested, let's go on a trip. Let's take a trip, honey. And maybe she is saying, because of what then follows, why don't we go on a trip back home? Let's go back to my country village, the place where we met. And let's visit my family. They lived on a farm, and it happened to be a farm that Solomon owned. So it was a very reasonable thought that he would go and check on his farm. And so I think this is what she is proposing. Let's go on a trip. Let's go back home. Let's check out the farm. And of course, when you're away on vacation, there are opportunities and maybe freedoms to be intimate with one another. She says, there I will give you my love. The mandrakes give off a fragrance, and at our gates are pleasant fruits. All manner new and old, which I have laid up for you, my beloved. Then she says, and to us in our culture we find it curious, but in chapter 8, verse 1, oh, that you are like my brother, who nursed at my mother's breasts. If I should find you outside, I would kiss you. I would not be despised. Let me translate that to say, a display of affection between siblings in this ancient culture would have been completely acceptable. No one would have thought twice about it. Here's a family, a loving family, and a brother and a sister greeting each other with I'm sure a chaste type of kiss, but if she were to kiss her husband in public, there would have been a hue and cry. No public display of affections among married couples. So that's why she's saying, well, you know, if you were my brother, I could actually show people in public that I love you. Of course, it doesn't work that way, but that's how she's saying it. She said, I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, she who used to instruct me. I would cause you to drink of spiced wine, of the juice of my pomegranate. Then she says, his left hand is under my head and his right hand embraces me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. Earlier, I think that was a phrase she used several other times, and it was a reminder to exercise caution and restraint. The rhythm of love. Let the courtship take its time. Let the wedding come at the appropriate time. Let's remain pure for the marriage bed. But now she's married, and I think she's saying there's a time and a place for physical intimacy, and maybe in a public park and out on the street is not the place. Perhaps we should box that up and send it to San Francisco, but I digress. Verse 5, who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? People saw them riding together in a carriage, and she was leaning against him. A public display of affection. But of course it conveyed the depth of their love. I awakened you under the apple tree. There your mother brought you forth. There she who bore you brought you forth. And the woman, the Shulamite, says to Solomon, set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. She wants to be sure that she is marked as his possession. Love is as strong as death. Jealousy as cruel as the grave. Its flames are flames of fire, a most vehement flame. Many waters cannot quench love, nor can the floods drown it. If a man would give for love all the wealth of his house, it would be utterly despised. Her brothers chime in. We have a little sister, and she has no breasts. Well, they had said that earlier when she was younger. What shall we do for our sister in the day when she is spoken for? If she is a wall, which is to say, if she is still a virgin, we will build upon her a battlement of silver. And if she is a door, implying that she had loose morals, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. She responds to them, you can't talk to me like I'm a little girl anymore. She said, I am a wall. In other words, I was a virgin when I got married. My breasts like towers. Then I became in his eyes as one who found peace. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Hamon. He leased the vineyard to keepers. Everyone was to bring for its fruit 1,000 silver coins. Then she says, vineyard is before me. You, O Solomon, may have 1,000, and those who tend its fruit 200. Someone suggested she's renegotiating the agreement Solomon had with those who tended the farm he owned so that her brothers would earn more money so that they could hire people to replace the work she was no longer able to do now that she was married and not there. Solomon, verse 13, you who dwell in the gardens, the companions listen for your voice. Let me hear it. The woman, make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. And we're left there hanging as the closing music rolls, the credits scroll down the screen, and we're left with this image of two people very much in love. And it sounds like a pretty ordinary marriage to me. They admired each other. There was a deep love for each other. There were some challenges. There were some misunderstandings at times. But ultimately, it was all about, we're in this together, and we have a growing love for each other. Now, I purposefully have not spent this study of Song of Solomon thinking about or comparing it to, as some like to do, a metaphor for Christ's love for the church. But let me remind you, it is a picture of genuine married love. And in Ephesians chapter 5, Paul says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. And it goes on, but it kind of describes the love that Solomon had for his beloved Shulamite and the love that Christ has for the church. So we're going to conclude by singing hymn number 340, thinking about the way Christ pursued us, sought us, wooed us, you might say, and our love for him. Hymn number 340, In Tenderness He Sought Me. Let's stand and sing together. In tenderness he sought me, weary and sick with sin, and on his shoulders brought me back to his fold again, while angels in his presence sang, until the courts of heaven rang. Oh, the love that sought me, oh, the blood that bought me, oh, the grace that brought me to the fold, wondrous grace that brought me to the fold. Father, thank you for the day we have had celebrating what Christ has done for us, learning from the pages of Scripture as we hear your voice, the things that will instruct us, make us knowledgeable of your will, and eager to understand and obey. I pray that we would leave here with that thought